Hello and welcome to the latest installment of the Grant Street Experience. I'm your host, Grant Ervin, and welcome to this great, fabulous podcast. Today we have author and organizer Paul Kendrick with us, along with our fabulous co-host, Rebecca Kiernan. Rebecca, how you doing today?
Good. How are you, Grant?
I'm doing great, Good to see you. Paul, welcome to the Grant Street Experience.
Thank you so much for having me. Really excited to be with my Pittsburgh friends.
So just for our listeners, a little bit of introduction here. Paul and I met recently through some work that we've done with our project, the Marshall Plan for Middle America, and got introduced to his organization, Rust Belt Rising. And Paul and I had a great chat about Pittsburgh and where it sits in kind of the Upper Appalachia region and the Great Lakes, and got the opportunity to connect with him and some fabulous leaders from the states, our neighbors in Ohio and Wisconsin, Michigan, and West Virginia a few weeks ago. And so we shared an opportunity to talk with each other, and great to have you here, Paul, and learn more about your work and some of the interesting things that you're doing.
Thank you so much. Well, what you all are doing in Pittsburgh is really, really incredible that, folks across our region really benefit from learning from, and obviously folks around the world are benefiting from learning from. So, you're really showing how to create a sustainable, thriving place. And that's something that is very vital for us to all be able to draw understanding of. So, great to continue talking.
Awesome. And so we're excited to have you here today for a couple of reasons. One, really wanted to talk with you about Rust Belt Rising and learn a little bit more about the organization, and if you could share that with listeners, but also some of your fabulous work as an author, which is a kind of a growing theme here that Rebecca and I have had on the Grant Street Experience, the opportunities to just investigate and learn from local authors here in the region, and really interested into diving into sharing with our listeners some of the stories that you've been able to pull together. But maybe first, if you could tell a little bit about the work of Rust Belt Rising and kind of the interest areas that you guys have in terms of the greater region here.
Yeah, Rust Belt Rising is a movement of now 470 leaders from Pennsylvania, Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin, Illinois, and Indiana, learning from each other and those who are making it happen, like Grant, of how we best connect with people and deliver change that benefits working families in our region. And we were founded after the 2016 election, as Democrats really saw places that we used to win that we weren't winning, and people weren't seeing how what we were for connected to their life, or even know what we were for. And so it is a training school in the sense of the courses we do and the virtual learning we do, and the individual support we give to emerging leaders and helping them hone their authentic message and vision for their place, but really creating a virtual space that allows them to learn from each other, because we have a real interest in the messaging of how we can really best communicate so that we can resonate, but behind that, the substance of how we deliver change, and in our post-industrial region, how we're helping places really turn the corner with the sense of kind of what's coming next for people, and how places can have a thriving economic future, and all the things that a family needs to flourish. And so we're doing this course this spring called Building Thriving Communities, really looking at that you were so helpful with, but we'll continue looking at how we win elections, and then really good approaches that we're seeing that are promising, that someone in Eastern Ohio can learn from someone in Western Pennsylvania, someone in Pennsylvania can learn from someone in Michigan. So everything we do is free. It's a political nonprofit, and it's been really amazing, the passionate leaders and communities, and that all that have similar challenges of some of the different cultural things happening in our region that have made it tough. But ultimately, we want to make sure people understand what Democrats are for our narrative, and that we really are the party of all working people.
I was going to say, what are some of the common themes that you see? Because we're talking about a big area, right? In terms of the geographic footprint, but like, what are some of these common themes and challenges that we're hearing across state boundaries? What are some of those narratives that are out there?
Well, I think it is about changing the narrative to help people see the assets of our region, whether it's our water, our lakes, our universities, just the talent and the hard work of people, the diversity, the quality of life that is possible, but does take, intentionality and the policy making, the place making. And as you so well articulate, that our region can really be the leader in the clean energy transformation that will stop climate change, and we have that potential. And so I think we want to always look at things from that kind of strength, asset-based kind of focus of what we have, and because I think it is really up to the kinds of democratic leaders we work with to put forward a vision for the future that I think people need to have an optimism to choose us. I think Trumpism has thrived in places in our region where that a certain pessimism can set in and be cultivated by some bad actors. But we want to really see what's possible and give people the realistic sense of that allows for that hope of what can come in the places that we love. So I think being able to communicate, to really lead with our values and our stories, to connect with people, to be able to effectively persuade, is the challenge you have in a lot of communities. But when you can do that, and we do see examples of it, when there is that trust between the voter, the leader, when people are working together on solving problems locally, then you do really have a chance to make the kinds of exciting beneficial policies that someone like you is doing in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, it's interesting. Rebecca, through the work that we did through the 100 Resilient Cities Initiative a few years back, there was these common themes, or we called them kind of the tectonic plates of globalization, urbanization, and climate change. So these kind of three things that all cities around the world are facing, whether it's the issues of climate, whether that's adapting to a new reality, or kind of the needs to mitigate the impacts of CO2, or urbanization challenges, whether that's people expanding kind of the urban footprint, or moving into urbanized areas. But you were interested too in this issue of globalization, like through the pandemic. I mean, any thoughts or questions that you have in that space?
Yeah, I feel like when we were going through that process, it was pretty nebulous, like at the time back in 2015, like what really is the impact of globalization? Like climate change, you kind of know, we're going to get warmer and wetter. Urbanization, we might have X population influx. But like globalization was like, well, maybe we'll lose jobs, or, we're more connected and we'll be able to learn from other cities or whatever. But like in 2020 and 2021, you've kind of had this explosion of like a cross, like a worldwide and like across the nation. It's all the same themes that are playing out in our cities, whether, the issue is concentrated there or not. So I guess I'm curious, Paul, like what have you seen themes, and like how in 2020 and 2021 has like some of the main issues changed, and how is your organization dealing with it? It feels like everything's happened very rapidly. But I guess I'm just curious about how that's impacted your work, and how other cities might be dealing with it, or other municipalities.
It's a heck of a question. So let me try to do my best to answer. But I think that in this globalized moment, we have to understand that in our region, our jobs can move everywhere. Southern states have been trying to take them places around the world. Employers can go everywhere, and so I think coming out of the 2016 election, and then even seeing it in the 2020 down ballot, I think a lot of people did not fully trust Democrats with their bottom line, and do not fully believe like we're the party focused on like the good jobs for them. And so that's happening in this context where there are a lot of communities, small, medium-sized, former manufacturing places, working class places, like to some extent rural places. Like there are different kinds of places that have experienced job loss, and so they've like having this lived experience, and then not really buying that. Even though I believe it to be true that the person with the D next to their name on the ballot is the one focused on making sure that their bottom line is improving, that they have good jobs, good wages. So I think what's happening right now is I think we have a real opportunity where President Biden is very focused on jobs, is very much defining us as a party that cares about jobs, about climate change. And defining climate change is about good jobs and the opportunity there. But we're focused on jobs, we're focused on good wages. And but then I think what differentiates us from Republicans is with all the things people need to thrive, whether that's taking on equality and civil rights to make sure we are a just, equitable country, thinking about the things a family needs, like childcare and affordable, higher education without, all this debt and a decent retirement and getting down healthcare costs. So I think we have, and people like that when they think about the things that they do like about Democrats, they do want those things for their family. And so, but I do think that they have to see them as married to the fundamentally like a path to a good job, with skills they have to build on and a career doing that. And so all of that is key because all around the world, we do see, a populist right rising when, in particular, folks are just not seeing the economic future for themselves that is going to improve their families' well-being. Obviously, this kind of nationalist, populist kind of politics capitalizes on that and mixes in all these grievances and racial resentments and different things. But but often that element is part of the nebulous there. So I do think it is important for us to really put forward that economic vision and deliver on it and have the results so people's lives are meaningfully improving and that there can be a certain optimism that inoculates hopefully enough people against those but we again do have to tell a story about the values of our community that people share and the challenges that a candidate has overcome and the things that are working against this and tell the accurate story of how the Wall Street and out-of-state corporations and these special interests have put these barriers in place because we know this populist right around the world is going to tell the story about immigrants and it's going to lie and blood libel them. So I think we have to have a story of that is the real one of a vision for the future and what we're up against, who's trying to divide us. But using the values of our community, how we can come together and take action and win for all of our families.
Have you seen, given like these tectonic plates that we talked about, right? Like globalization, urbanization, and climate, like what has the impact of these issues at the local level been because of the pandemic? Like have you seen in kind of your conversations with communities across the region an acceleration of issues, or like what is the impact or your sense been because of the pandemic on these challenges?
One thing I heard from state representative candidates in Michigan and Ohio and Western Pennsylvania who did not win and did not do as well as we hoped they would do is they did say, I heard people saying, Democrats just want to keep us on lockdown and, and not let us work. And that's a tough thing because there are because Democratic leaders who are, in the governorships of some of these states are doing the right thing, doing their best, in good faith to try to figure out the right balance of keeping people safe, helping us survive, keeping us alive during this thing. But also thinking about small business. But I think we really got hit with a sense of we're against small business, we're against workers, and that's just a tough thing. But I really admire the decisions, the hard decisions that a lot of these leaders had to make. I just think so. But going forward, as we're coming out of this pandemic, I do think it's really, really important, for our party to be able to be, the party of Main Street businesses, up against, these out-of-state corporations and, these venture capital, things that are, hurting, that the local company that's been employing people for all this time, and so that's not always how Democrats talk, and so I just think that's really important to understand that we're the party of working people, working families, Main Street businesses, folks trying to grow a business, that is all a part of what will allow our town to really thrive.
Right.
And so I think that's really key. I don't know how much the climate change piece factored against us in the election in any way, and I think it's more just a positive of young people, help bring particularly young people understand the stakes of the election, and it's clear we're the party trying to take on this challenge, and the other party just doesn't even believe in it. So but I think we really have a moment of opportunity that we don't know how long it'll last, when it'll come again. We just really have to deliver on I think in this infrastructure package on things that are going to allow America to confront this existential challenge. But I love the framing of it in jobs, and then obviously state and local leaders, and you're a great guide on how to do this, have to find smart ways that are there that every community, every state can be taking action and doing things and making their policies putting us in a more sustainable place, but ideally that we can really lead on this.
Do you see that in the space? I'm sure there's other types of similar types of regional organizations to yours. The issue of jobs and climate in particular in this, and connected to really the globalization connection, is integrated, and that's one of the things that we've seen through the development of the Marshall Plan for Middle America concept, is that by bringing those two together, you start to see what the opportunity that the future could bring, right? Does that resonate in other regions beyond kind of the Great Lakes and Upper Appalachia, or I don't know if you've seen anything in other parts of the country?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that honestly, I could be wrong on this, but I think to some extent, on the West Coast and in New England, you can just say we're doing this to stop climate change, and and people are yes, that's what we want. I do wonder if, but I mean, I'm not exactly sure, but I think wherever you are, but particularly in our region, I think when you lead with the very tangible things that people can see, that's what puts you in the best position. If we start with talking about clean water and making sure that our water is clean, everyone agrees with that. And so we need not get into the way that environmental politics have gotten kind of commandeered into the culture wars, and it's the elites versus the hardworking people that might lose their jobs and stuff. But if let's not reinforce that kind of narrative around division. Let's focus on things we all want and problem solving. And it's I was just talking with this amazing guy, Matt Russell, a farmer in Iowa, who is just incredible with just changing the way we organize, and we need to come to farmers and help. Let's solve this problem together. What would it take? What would be for you to be doing these different farming strategies that would be best for our emissions and environment, and then for the farmers it would be about, okay, well, if you pay me to, if the incentives were set up to do those things, I would do them,
Right.
but we often come with the policy, and we have the solution, where I think ultimately change comes when you have a conversation with people, you listen, you really try to understand why they think what they think, and then inviting them in together, that how do we solve these problems. So I think that's really important when you are talking about kind of, I guess, persuasion communities where there is not as much, if you just said you support the Green Deal, but it's not a New Deal, it's not about folks that might just say yes, whereas I don't know, maybe if you're doing politics in California or Massachusetts, that people would just say I just want to stop the threat of climate change, but I'm not exactly sure.
it's those issues that are like all politics is local, right? Like you have to boil down the message for the people that you're working with, right?
Yeah, and I think, and then with clean energy, being able to show examples like, oh, well, this thing over here, the we got, people are getting these good jobs on this, wind turbines or solar installation, like, so, why don't we double that and let's have 100 more good jobs doing that? I just think it can't be this like futuristic stuff that people are just like ultimately kind of skeptical of, like, what does that mean for me? Like, it just has to be really tangible. And so I think as leaders, it's, we have to like challenge ourselves to not just lead with the things that are persuasive to us. We're already persuaded, but really think about and listen to what someone else wants, and then be like, really getting it across. And then I think we can talk about, future generations and how, our traditions and the land we love and the water we love, how that will be there for our future generations. I really do believe is resonant. We just got to, keep everything local.
Right. Rebecca, you've seen some of this with some of our work with in terms of that we'll call it the environmental workforce, right? Whether it's with the Hazelwood Greenway project or even in some of the urban agriculture spaces. We've had some conversations the past couple of days about how we can bring resources back, or not just back, but into the region as part of like urban forest reclamation and things in that space. I mean, what are some of the areas that you feel that investment can really catalyze that next generation workforce?
I mean, so like Paul had said in the beginning, some of the things that I think resonate the most are those like community assets. So that's what we've been focusing on in the Hazelwood project, in the Hazelwood Greenway project. So we have these, just, for a quick background, we have these large spaces that are called greenways. They're usually along steep hillsides. They've been unmanaged for 40 or 50 years, since the 80s. But we're trying to find some funding and the partnerships and the community-driven planning to turn them into community assets instead of liabilities. So I think this is like a weird sweet spot where, from the city's perspective, we've noticed in recent years, we are experiencing the impacts of climate change. We've been warmer and wetter. We're having extreme highs and extreme lows. That's kind of wreaking havoc on a lot of our infrastructure, but our hillsides are also slipping. So in order to kind of get a hold on some of these large tracts of land that are now being swallowed by invasive species and vines, and don't probably have much more longevity without some sort of, an intervention and some maintenance. There seems to be a sweet spot where, you get the community really engaged in turning this into an asset in a community space, with trail building or, thinking about that specific location. But then it also has that co-benefit of, being resilient or adapting it to the environmental impacts that we're already seeing, the weather changes, et cetera.
You've seen stuff just through like our Marshall Plan project. We've had, the opportunity to work with a number of different cities throughout the region. One in particular that comes to mind is the city of Athens in southeastern Ohio, the home of Ohio University. And Mayor Patterson there always talks about the environment as an asset to the ability to reclaim the workforce. And I think it's really true across the region where these ideas of reclamation and kind of retaking nature as an opportunity to rebuild back could create a lot of great jobs for people, as well as kind of sustainable careers if we're able to reposition it. Paul, one of the things that when we first met each other, we learned that you're a noted author, and one of the things I think that's really fabulous about kind of your work is the thread of social justice kind of runs through you literally. And I was wondering if you might be able to kind of share a little bit about kind of the three novels that you've written, Sarah's Long Walk, Douglas and Lincoln, and then 9 Days, about Martin Luther King's life. First off, though, I got it. Maybe a good place to start for folks. In two of those three, I think your dad is your co-author. Is that right?
All three. All
three.
Yeah. So we've been real partners in this whole.
Can you
trilogy.
talk a little about what's it like to work with your dad? He must be a pretty terrific guy. And then also, that theme. Why is that theme so important to you in your work?
Yeah. Well, the theme is really interracial collaboration in American history, and we didn't set out to write this trilogy in a sense, but the stories I guess we were drawn to really are stories that about people across racial lines working together in some way, and not in like and we don't do this in a Pollyannish starry-eyed way, but like in the complexities, the things we get wrong, the things we get right, but ultimately I think they are kind of hopeful examples that we ought to learn from, and in these most recent two, also in the activist and politician relationship, whether it's Martin Luther King and John Kennedy, in Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln. And so, that adds another layer of challenge, but that we, in looking at activists that we ought to, go back to and better understand, that could help us find a way forward today, but also in like courageous political leadership. So, but we work really well together, my father. I mean, some people would say, "Oh, I couldn't, bear to have my parents look at a paper in high school." It's just like, you just painful. But we kind of have no ego and a good collaboration. I love kind of digging into the research to tell history in a very vivid way. That these are nonfiction; it's all based on extensive research, but so that you as a reader can have an almost novelistic experience. I love history like that, where we have a lot of research discoveries, but so you are learning a lot about these like threads in American history and these monumental figures that hopefully we are humanizing to you, and that's what folks have said, but we're paying attention to good narrative, and particularly in this most recent one, 9 days, where it is, I think pretty like thrilling and suspenseful, and absorbing, and we worked very hard to think about the structure, and it took years of editing and honing down to give you an exciting reading experience while you're learning some really important history. And so so we got interested in this because we got interested with Sarah's Long Walk in a civil rights case that happened in Boston before the Civil War. That was like the first 40s and 50s. That was about a struggle for equal schools, to desegregate school before the Civil War, while slavery, existed in half the country. But it was the beginning of the 100-year road to Brown versus the Board of Education. But because a 23-year-old Black lawyer named Robert Morris had taken the case of a 5-year-old Black girl, Sarah Roberts, who had to walk past 5 white schools. And so with a white lawyer named Charles Sumner, who went on to become a famous senator, they brought this case. So that was an amazing story that we wanted to tell. And then that kind of led to this telling the Civil War through Frederick Douglass's eyes, and how the Civil War became about freedom with Black soldiers fighting, because of the vision and the dedicated activism of Douglass, and how Lincoln was ultimately able to listen and ultimately able to, with impeccable political timing and skill, in slavery, through the constitutionally, but Douglass had a vision of Black men fighting, and they really had ended slavery by, running from enslavement and joining a Union army that was pretty revolutionary. And so was Douglass Lincoln. And then 9 days, the race to save Martin Luther King's life and win the 1960 election, is about an arrest of Dr. King, a young Dr. King, 3 weeks before the 1960 election, and how his life was imperiled during his first overnight imprisonment of his life, during harrowing 9 days as he was sent to a rural Georgia prison after doing the sit-in with Black student activists that really challenged him to go to jail for the first time. So that would change the course of his life and his activism that allowed him to go on and change America. But it's about why the Kennedy campaign ended up speaking up for King and helping get him out, and why Nixon's campaign didn't at a moment when the Black vote was really up for grabs in America. And so it tells the story of an interracial team that was working on civil rights for the Kennedy campaign, and how they would kind of go rogue to not only intervene in this King case, but then work to swing the Black vote to make the crucial difference in this narrowly close election, but ultimately to give us the politics we have today, as well as why the decisions Nixon made are the other part of why we have the politics we have today.
That's fascinating. Now, when you guys did you conceptualize this as a trilogy, or have they been cumulative as you've started to research?
Yeah, it just worked out that way, but it sounds cool to say trilogy, but it's just we fall in love with the story.
But there is an interwoven part of the narrative, right? Like that's what's kind of fascinating about it.
Yeah, there really is, and we love those who are thoughtful about change today, reading these stories, and then it helps us, I think, with new eyes, see what's going on today, and understanding the relevance, and people have, with 9 Days in particular, just given me really, I think, very insightful thoughts that made them have about our politics today, and the activism, and how we are, in this time of the movement for Black lives, how we are fighting for justice together, but also the appeals that both parties make, and what works in politics, and why John Kennedy calling Coretta King and Bobby Kennedy calling this judge, why those ended up being really resonant. And so there's a lot to be gained, and I think for me, almost more than anything else, just really learning about these characters who I got to know, the survivors of this Atlanta student movement, the sit-in movement, and how brilliant they were in interjecting their issue into this campaign and forcing politicians to and the public to grapple with the injustices that we may want to ignore, and just kind of to not focus in on and not address, but really make people have to grapple with that, and how Dr. King became the King that we know. So, but to your question, more than a decade separated this book from the second book, so it was a matter of kind of waiting for a story to. I mean, writing a book is so hard. It takes so much work that you really have to feel. I love this story so much. It just inherently gets across a lot that I care about, is characters that, and we wanted to. 4 or 5 of the people that we spend time with have passed away since, so we really wanted to record these stories and tell this. So it kind of fit the values and passions we have, just like the story as is. It doesn't need any manipulating to do that. But that was what we thought. This is a story that has to be told. It will inspire people, and luckily it has. But the immediate impetus was a former senator of your state, because I was introduced to Harris Wofford, who was
quick piece on that is that I this is like 6 degrees of separation. I used to work with Harris's son Dan.
Awesome.
So Dan Wofford and I used to work together. So it's like 6 degrees.
Such a kind man.
Pretty tight state.
Well, he's been a great champion for the book, and really appreciate it, and just so all the Woffords are such nice people, and so that's cool. So I figured anyone who's involved in Pennsylvania politics would have encountered a Wofford, Dan or Harris, but Harris had been a friend and advisor of Dr. King, and then was working on the Kennedy campaign, but because he had this association with King as this rare white advisor who had gone to Howard Law School, was passionate about nonviolence, heard about this minister doing it, befriended King, was very helpful to King, But then he's working on the Kennedy campaign, and his friend's in jail, and he realized, what am I doing? I got to help get him out. And he kind of ambles into, ultimately that he and his teammate, who was a Black journalist from Chicago named Louis Martin, and then their boss, Sergeant Shriver, the three of them kind of end up being mavericks on the campaign for what they end up doing. But I was introduced to Harris because someone knew I was passionate about civil rights and was like, oh, you love talking to Harris, and he's such a kind man. And but my father was like, that's really a story that ought to be a full book, like the story of these last days of the campaign. And so the time I spent with Harris was really precious. And because for Harris, like, we grew up with Dr. King and monuments, and then footage that's black and white that seems like from a long time ago. But Dr. King was his friend. Kennedy was, he knew the Kennedys well, and so he helped us again see these figures in as young men making fast decisions that would end up defining history. And he misses his friends. He passed away 2 years ago, getting near 2 years now. But so I felt very lucky to spend a lot of time with him, and then also with the veterans of the Atlanta student movement who went to jail with King, and had gotten King to take this really risky, bold leap into going into a Southern jail and doing an imprisonment. And so very special. But Harris was an incredible man. I wish he could have been a senator from Pennsylvania for longer, but he did so much good in his life. I mean, it's like just one of the most amazing American lives of all the different things he did throughout it.
He's one of those people that you look at the resume and you're like, how did you have all the time to do this? Like, that's the
him and Shriver found the Peace Corps, and then later AmeriCorps, so he has this whole national service thing. But then the senator was like, ran on universal health care and really showed the electoral power of that. And had been like a college president. I mean, he just really, some of the ones that they called him like Forrest Gump of social change. Like, he just kept like showing up, but he had a real instinct, I think, for what was coming next and when history might be opening up. And again, to hear about this young minister in Montgomery and just start writing him letters. I think fundamentally Harris was he was willing always to like sacrifice his own career to do what was right and to speak up for the right causes, and that's something we can learn from. And he just was unafraid to just get in there and just take action. And he marches in Selma on the march to Montgomery. So all of that I think is just a real model for all of us, that we come up with a lot of reasons not to act. And like Harris just always got in the mix and found ways to be helpful and supportive and valuable.
Right. One of the things too, you mentioned this is the idea of the interrelationship between activists and politicians, whether that's in the 1860s or the 1960s. How do you think that starts to interplay in today's world? And question for both of you, I guess. We've lived through this time. Rebecca, I'd be interested in kind of your insights too, is like, we're living through this time where all of these underlying stressors, some of which we've talked about early on in our conversation, have really been uncovered is not the word. We've known that they've been there, but the pandemic has amplified them, right? Where everyone has like a heightened sense of what the issues are, their awareness of them, and they're playing out so fast and in real time. And I don't know, maybe Rebecca, start with you. Like, what are some of your thoughts in terms of that activist politics kind of, and not just politics, but policy? Like, how do we take kind of that activism and turning it into meaningful change? Be interested in your guys' thoughts on that.
Yeah, I can start. That's a good question. I mean, just from being a city employee and like, working in the middle of it, we had started working on all this resilience stuff in 2015, which was like a couple of years ahead. And I feel like a lot of what we were starting to, I mean, everything was bubbled to the surface in 2020, right? But like, I don't think that all of those issues were necessarily measured or out in the forefront yet. So I mean, when we're working on all these plans and analyses, developing our shocks and stresses profiles, like this was all new, but it was only, you know, a couple of years ago. I feel like now that it's more widely recognized that a lot of our plans were right. And as we kept releasing reports, I feel like that they caught on more. And I almost feel like as people started to catch on, like government was slightly ahead in identifying the stresses that ultimately came to a head in 2020. But as you know, it's hurting people, you know, myself included, everybody, right? That's been targeted at politicians, right? Like there's a blame, there's a system that's been happening for, you know, hundreds of years. And when you get to 2015 and you start to recognize, you know, where all the detangling needs to happen within our processes to address, you know, the inequities and the climate change and all the systems that have led us to this point, it takes a long time. So I think, you know, just thinking about the work that Paul does and the messaging, it's been really difficult to explain that it's a long game. And that like everything that's now at the surface is, you know, hard for government to detangle and hard for, you know, people to handle. And I think that, you know, we're all marching together and like trying to figure out how to address it, but it's all new and it's all uncovered, I guess. I don't know if that answered.
Yeah.
But
I mean, there's no
yeah.
instant fixes, right? And it's kind of that there was a lot of the work, and not just, this isn't just Pittsburgh, but you know, any city that has done a resilience strategy, a climate plan, a social equity strategy, like they're very, particularly pre-2020, they seem to be very prescient, right? Like that, you know, these things are happening, being identified, people are working, but also like it almost seems as if the, you know, the rate of change is unable to meet the moment. Like we systems don't move as fast as change is required, right?
Yeah.
I mean, was that some of the same case in like the 1860s in the Lincoln Douglas example, or in the, you know, we talk about like Harris Wofford and Kennedy and Dr. King, like, you know, monumental things happen, but they just don't happen overnight, right?
No, but yeah, I mean, yeah, these were, you know, monumental things of, you know, ending slavery, of you know, getting to civil rights legislation. But I can only imagine the impatience and the urgency, and you know, for Douglas, seeing the Civil War was this opportunity. It could evolve into this, but like, what if it didn't? And the opportunity of his life was missed. And so you know, he was really pushing. You know, obviously, it's, you know, every day is a you know, lives are lost and immeasurable, you know, damage done by people that, you know, for people that are not free, and you know, and same thing, you know, kind of playing out in the civil rights movement, to not have rights. So I think the theme that is both about effective work across racial lines and about politicians and activists is ultimately like genuine listening is really needed. And I think everyone says that, like, listening just sounds fine, but like, are you actually like willing to, in very consequential moments, trust, you know, lived experience that about, you know, of that are not, that comes from those who have different experiences than you, and you know, and a sense of what needs to be done that might not have been kind of your own go-to, or certainly may not be safe politically. And so you know, with Lincoln able to ultimately listen to Douglas and get behind Black troops, and with, you know, Kennedy listening to his civil rights staffers to some extent, even though they nearly essentially do get, well, you have to read the book, but they very nearly get fired essentially, and then end up doing some things that they don't even tell him they do. But he does call Coretta King, based on this idea that comes and Nixon doesn't, despite that Nixon had black activists, black staffers who are also activists like Jackie Robinson telling him, the same advice, but he, makes that different calculation. And so the listening is key. And then I think for the politician, but being able to bring the public along so that these changes can stick, so that you can actually make them happen, that the politician has to have some skill in timing and persuasion and communication, and the activists have to have the skill that you really see in the genius of the moral theater that King creates in places, goes on to create that in places like Birmingham. Once he was he was unafraid to stare down death and create this activism that was that did change a lot of hearts and minds. And so, so he's creating the change in the public will, that creates change in the public will. And he is thinking about, how do I bring more people along to my side? How do I, set up the situation that makes people feel, that's wrong, what's going on? I want a change, for what's right. And the sit-ins, these college students, at these lunch counters getting taken off to jail, the situations King and others and leaders in the civil rights movement create were super effective in, and also just showing people the urgency of the problem, and this can't be put off. It's not a minor thing, and that's borne out in a lot of data that it took people to seeing it as something that needs to be addressed. So the activists, we have to move people along, and we can do that in our daily life too, just in conversations and and Facebook posts and one thing at a time, and but also obviously in showing up and marching and finding different ways and talking to our political officials, and so we have to create that context so that politicians can do the bolder thing. But we want, and so I think we see in this past election, Biden I think did impress a lot of people in really listening to Black Lives Matter activists, to Sunrise Movement, and climate activists, and bringing them to the table for solutions, like making a call to Jacob Blake's family in Kenosha. I mean, he was willing to show up, and but things have to be delivered on, or trust is lost, and so he has to find ways to move things forward. And then I think just last thought on activism is like, in Georgia, you really see the power of organizing it, and that part of activism of doing the work to the activism shows the stakes of the election and can clarify where the politicians stand. But long-term change, and I think this is instructive for our region, can come about through dedicated vision and strategy in the organizing. Around things that people want together, and taking action together. And in Georgia, that ended up meaning electing the present day minister of Dr. King's church to the Senate, and along with a Jewish American senator, young Senator Nassab. And so that's a pretty hopeful thing in this state that our story was set in, quite an amazing coda that shows what's possible. But we'll need to protect that and keep making that kind of change in other places.
And we'll see what the next chapters bring, right? So just want to say,
politicians in there.
Just to kind of wrap it up here, coming up against time, and I would be remiss to not ask this question with an author. So Rebecca and I always like to talk with guests about what you're reading, what you're watching, or what you're listening to. And so I would imagine there's a couple of good choices right behind you there. But Paul, what's on your reading list right now, or do you have another book in mind? That's another good question for you. What's coming up for you?
Excited to read someone I interviewed for the book, he had just gotten to campus and said, okay, I'll do the sit-in and go to jail with you all. Just so brave as an 18-year-old of, parents saved up, had this dream, send you to college, and then you go to jail immediately, for freedom and civil rights, named Charles Person, really kind man. His memoirs were just published. And so I'm really excited to read it. It's called The Bus Is Coming. Because he was then the youngest freedom rider. So he did this first imprisonment during the events of 9 days. And then pretty soon after, the next year, put stand up. And so he's the last surviving freedom rider who went from Washington all the way to New Orleans. And so it's an important testament. So that's what I'm reading and recommend to others. And my father and I are not sure yet what we write next, but one thing we would love to write about and are putting some ideas together on is Lafayette Square, and how I think illustrative of the long struggle in America between multiracial coalitions protesting for justice and white supremacy within using government means, how it all collides on that day last spring, when nonviolent Black Lives Matter protesters are met with violence by Trump's forces, and I think it was a really
defining moment,
pivotal moment, defining moment in that election that showed that Trump was not going to rise to the occasion leadership-wise to bring people together, and I think that the movement really really did clarify the stakes for a lot of people, but it would ultimately be a larger book in the sense of about American protest, and so I think that could kind of continue our themes, but we'll see. But that would be that is our next idea.
Start taking notes now, right?
Yeah, exactly, and talking to friends that were there and stuff. So Lafayette Square would be the next idea. But we'll see. It takes such a long time to write a book. We poured so much interviews and research in the local papers and the oral histories of 1960 to write 9 days. Right now, it's great to focus on Rust Belt Rising, and we really welcome everyone to sign up, to get our invites to our sessions, join us, utilize our resources, because we'll help people run for office or be effective on behalf of those who are running, and the activism that folks are doing locally around our region. And so folks should go to rustbeltrising.com, sign up. Again, it's all free, and we love to help people. And so for me, I'm really enjoying as we're building for 2022 and local elections that are happening even sooner. It's great of helping again really authentic candidates in our region run for office. So enjoying that, and enjoying people getting to talk about 9 days, and really the reaction to the book has been really heartening. And so I hope people will continue to pick it up, because folks enjoy reading it.
Awesome, thanks, Paul. Rebecca, quickly, how about you? What are you consuming right now?
I'm trying to spend as much time outside as possible, so I don't even have a good answer. But plant identification books, maybe.
Weren't you doing some mushroom hunting though?
Yep. Yeah, it's mushroom season. I found a few morels, if you're familiar with those. Pennsylvania is like the mushroom capital of, I think, the country.
90% of all mushrooms are produced in Chester County, I believe.
Yeah.
Wow, I had no idea.
Yeah. What are you gonna do with the morels?
Well, I already ate them.
Oh yeah. How did you prepare them? Like, what did you
saute them?
Saute them?
I was real excited. I've never found them before, so this is the first year I actually got a couple.
So you just little olive oil, salt, pepper, or
or butter or whatever,
and just use them as a side, or
depends on how many you have, I guess.
Okay, all right. Yeah. Have you found any more of those chicken of the woods?
I have a freezer full from last year. They typically each of them has a season, right? So morels come first, and then I think there's a first flush of chicken of the woods in early summer, and then there's another flush in late summer or early fall.
Hold on, that's like a whole new term for me. A flush.
Flush. I might have made that up.
Okay. So it's like a flock of birds. You have a flush of mushrooms. Is that?
Yeah, I guess so.
Is that a thing? All right.
Maybe.
I'm gonna go look that up. That's
Yeah, don't
I
hold me
believe
to that. I'm at a
I totally believe you. If not, maybe it will be. It'll start to catch on. So, well, hey, I just finished on your recommendation, David Attenborough's. Kind of the arc of his life, and how he is, experienced kind of, in real lifetime, kind of our changing climate, the impact on the population. And
Oh, great.
it's
really good.
yeah, super well done, great
Oh.
cinematography, really nice. So
Great. I mean, there were some great movies this year. I loved Judas and the Black Messiah. I thought it was a great one. Sound of Metal, One Night in Miami, White Tiger. What else? Minari. Yeah, there's been some. I'm sure I'm forgetting some I really liked, but yeah, there's been, I think, some really powerful movies. So yeah, so those are some that I've been watching, and usually listening to the Chicago band Whitney. That's my favorite tracks at the moment. So those are all my media recommendations.
well, I'm taking notes here. So
Yeah.
Paul, we want to thank you. Rebecca, thank you as always. We want to thank everyone for listening in to the Grant Street Experience. Without you, we wouldn't have any listeners, and this wouldn't be as much fun. But thanks to our guest, Paul Kendrick, and thanks, Paul, for your contributions to our region and the work that you do. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for everything you do for our region and for Pittsburgh. It's been such an honor and a pleasure to be with you today.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone, and listen in to the Grant Street Experience, and we'll check you out on the next episode. Take care and have a great day.